Today I'm going to discuss tips and settings on how to photograph the plants and flowers of the forest or nature or the landscape where you are. I'm going to have 7 tips for you, really quick, really fast, really easy to apply. So let's get started. Tip number 1 is to stay really low, down to the plant level or the flower level. This way you are photographing from the same height as the plant or the flower, and because you're doing this, you create a separation between the plant and the rest of the background. Tip number 2, use open apertures. When you're using an open aperture like let's say 2.8, 1.4, 1.8, even f4, the depth of field is smaller. When you have small depth of field, you're going to have only the subject in focus, and then the rest of the elements, they're going to be in a blur. And again, you're creating separation. Tip number 3 is to use a longer focal length. This also helps with having a smaller depth of field. The moment you increase the focal length, something like above 70 millimeters, you automatically get a shorter depth of field, especially if you're staying close to your subject. So the focus point is, let's say, 2 or 3 meters from you. Tip number 4, fill the frame with the plant or with the flower. You can think of it as a portrait shot, and don't make the mistake of focusing with the center point of your camera and then having the entire upper part of the photo empty with nothing in it. Consider focusing or placing the interest part of the plant or the flower in the upper part of the image, and this way you can have a frame that is filled by that flower or plant. Tip number 5, use something to diffuse harsh light. If you don't have a professional element that will diffuse light, just use a simple umbrella. The only problem with these elements is that you're going to have someone to hold it for you. But if it's a harsh light, if you don't have sunrise light or sunset light, or if it isn't cloudy outside to have natural diffuse light, these things can help you a lot with creating an interesting image. Tip number 6, use a sprinkler. I have the smallest that I could find. You don't have to fill it with water when you're home. Just put a little bit of water in it when you are on location. It makes a lot of difference, especially if you're photographing in the morning light and there is no dew on the flowers. You can create it with the sprinkler. Now, you can use it in any situation when you're photographing plants, flowers, fruits, all sorts of small natural elements. It looks a little bit more interesting to have a little bit of droplets of water. Tip number 7 is to break rule number 1. Remember when I said to you that you should stay really low to photograph at the subject level? Well, there are plants that are growing really high, and you have the ability to look down on them, and when you're doing this, you're going to separate the upper part of the flower from the lower part of the background. And now a bonus tip: experiment. You can do some really interesting shots, especially with flowers, if you're using intentional camera movement and you rotate the camera while you're photographing. And this is the way I created this small series of photos, and I'm sure that if you look at them, you really like it. Now, if you want to learn more about landscape photography, check my ebook, and the link is in the description of this video. You can also join me for one of my workshops. Until next time, keep on photographing. It's the only way that you can get better. Bye-bye.